Against the grain of finite philosophy, the Hegelian system does not have an epistemology in any way which could be understood by what is meant by such a term in the Enlightenment, Analytic, Continental, and post-structural philosophical movements. In the common philosophical sense of epistemology, which concerns the way in which consciousness knows an object, knowledge is just this relationship of the knower representing the known. Hegel conceives knowledge as being without reference to representational cognition or a finite embodied thinker. Pure knowledge is absolute knowing, that is, knowing that knows itself as knowing. Such knowledge is logic and does not fall within the subject-object structure of epistemology. The question of logic is not about how one can know something, or justifying that one knows it, but instead concerns the precise determination and consequence of the object of cognition. Given that one understands or comprehends a given concept, there is a specific structure and operation which must be adhered to so long as we think it, and are within its logic. To fail to hold to the concept is simply to not understand it, and there can be no question as to why a subject has failed to grasp it, for the subject has failed to grasp its sense, that is, its meaning, in the first place. That is, one has failed to construct it in their own mind even when a clear determination is given. In such a case, no appeal can be made to something before the physical senses, only pure meaning. One can either cognize this meaning, or one can never have the object present no matter what anyone else may tell them. The Phenomenology of Spirit is Hegel's longest sustained critique of the standpoints of consciousness as forms of knowing or cognition. The negative deconstruction of epistemology as commonly understood is in the first major section, consciousness, which concerns three distinct levels of knowledge or knowing: sense certainty, radical empiricism like David Hume's, perception, qualified empiricism like John Locke's, and understanding, qualified rationalism like Gottfried Leibniz, Isaac Newton's, and Immanuel Kant's. In the later section of observing reason, it may be said that Hegel attacks scientific rationalism, which is often connected to epistemic concerns. Another short and concise critique can be found in the introduction to the Encyclopedia of Philosophical Sciences in the first, second, and third attitude of thought to objectivity. The closest to an epistemic theory in Hegel's system is in the sections of the Encyclopedia of Philosophical Sciences, Subjective Spirit. The first major section concerns anthropology and phenomenology. The second is psychology. Phenomenology deals with consciousness developing into intellect, or psychology, and intellect deals with the rise of cognition from sense particulars to concepts as pure representations a priori in the finite mind. This gives the account of how finite thinkers know an internal and external world, but it does not provide the account which justifies knowledge in an absolute sense. The account of justification and pure knowledge belongs to the science of logic's doctrine of the concept. What is dealt with in subjective spirit can be considered to be finite cognition. Cognition is also a logical concept in the penultimate chapter of the science of logic, the idea of cognition. The cognition which is determined at the end of the science of logic when compared to the cognition determined in the Encyclopedia Subjective Spirit is quite similar but not identical. The cognition of the idea is not representational and does not involve consciousness. Its determinations are works of self-creation, intellectual intuition, which before the idea manifests its own actualized freedom. If epistemology is generally the theory of knowledge, what is it that we know? Truth. Unlike common philosophical views, Hegelianism does not treat truth as an epistemic concern. Truth does not even belong to what is commonly understood as logic, for this is the domain of the concept. Yet truth arrives only with the idea. In the current era of philosophy, truth has been reduced primarily to two positions: correspondence and coherence. The problem with correspondence is its assumption of the criterion of truth as given. For example, it is said that if I state that it is raining, and it is in fact raining, then the fact of rain has made my proposition true. This assumes that rain is to be given as a true measure, but this measure is based on my concept of rain, through which I look upon the facts to recognize rain. Philosophy must put concepts themselves to task and demands that these themselves be true. However, the question of whether a concept is itself true baffles the common understanding, because truth in the usual sense concerns the accord of objects and propositions or concepts, measured from the side of an object we simply assume to be a true measure, as opposed to being as much a fiction as our own propositions. When faced with the inability to posit any objective given measure, coherence or consistency are called upon as the measures of truth. Whereas in correspondence, the subjectivity of the opposition is hidden. In coherence, it is in the open. What makes things true is merely their consistency with other claims of knowledge in a web of beliefs. The problem is, of course, that there can be a plurality of equally coherent beliefs which overall do not cohere with each other due to different foundations. Coherentism moves truth from epistemology to formal logic, for it is no longer a relation to a given object that provides truth, but a relation of claims to each other. Hegel denies the common views of truth as they are conceived, but salvages them by removing them from epistemology and formal logic. While there is in fact a more speculative view of correspondence in everyday life, that of correspondence of object to concept instead of concept to object, for example, true gold, a true friend, and so on, such a view is still epistemic. Truth as such, absolute truth, is the correspondence of a concept with itself. The idea is truth itself, and yields the determinations of absolute correspondence, that is, self-correspondence, and absolute coherence, that is, the self-coherence of incoherence. Only that which is coherent with itself can correspond with itself, and only that which corresponds with itself can be coherent. This has not only conceptual, but ontological or existential significance. Truth becomes identical with the good, and being or reality. Falsehood becomes an incoherence and failure to correspond with itself, and is evil which leads to self-destruction and death. It is only a shadow of truth with no reality of its own. Truth for speculative philosophy does not pertain to my claims, but to things themselves. For the common notion of truth as subjective correspondence and coherence, Hegel reserves the term correctness. If I arbitrarily define an object and find such a definition in some manner in the world, my definition or proposition can be called correct, but it cannot be called true.